So
These books
Josephus was
influence
not
these things.
hold on, hold on. So Josephus was not the court historian.
The court historian? No,
Yeah.
no,
Oh, he wasn't.
no.
Oh, news flash to the world.
Okay,
You learned it here today. History has changed at this moment.
sweet.
Josephus wasn't
So,
the court
anyways,
historian for the Flavian dynasty.
just
So the following exchange is between me and this atheist online, debating the historical relevance or truth of Jesus and Paul. Mainly Paul. He makes a channel out of basically arguing that they didn't even historically exist. And you'll see I present my arguments to him, and he just goes into panic mode and sort of deflects and deflates. And we're going to go over the points. We're going to go over the information and the citations, and I'm going to show you why he was wrong.
inevitably, or whatever form of Judaism that does it, go to a place that circumcises half off.
Well, no, that's what I converted from Orthodox Judaism to Karaite Judaism. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what Karaite Judaism is, but it's essentially Judaism without the Talmud.
Okay.
So,
Well,
but to kind of get to
that just sounds like Christians LARPing as Jewish people.
no, I mean, if you wanted to get into the whole Orthodox versus Karaite thing, I don't think that's what you wanted to talk about.
But what you got? What you got for us?
So, I guess where we agree, I would say I agree with you that the Jesus that we're presented with in the New Testament was probably a creation of the Romans, probably of the Flavian dynasty, in my opinion. I do think that there was a Jesus that existed. I think that he was exist. I think there was a Jesus person that existed. I just don't think it was the one that we're presented with per se. And I do believe that Paul existed, and I have some sort of strong circumstantial evidence that I'll present to you for his existence. I'm not going to prove it to you 100%. I'm going to come out the gate with that. But I'm going to give you some strong circumstantial evidence that I think Paul did exist.
Wait, slow. My penis can only get so erect. I need you to understand that what you have already done is you have started talking about Roman provenance, which is like one of the easiest things for us to debunk, and you activated hard mode, which is the idea that whenever somebody comes in here and says that we have evidence for Paul, like what? Like,
I know
nothing of what you're saying
like
is going to go the way that you think it's going to go. It's not going to be fun.
Okay. Well, give me a chance.
Do you have anything else?
Effect for hard mode?
Say
so
what? What was that?
For one, I would say that, and get ready to put a mark on your board, because I'm going to cite Josephus. Get ready. There you go. Boom. There it is. I would say that we have a family tree given to us by Josephus of the Herods. And it shows that he mentions Antipater II, who he says is the governor over Tarsus. And he claims that he has a wife named Cypros. He has children named Saul, or he also calls him Saulus in another place. And he has another son named Costobarus and Antipater III. Now, we know that Paul changed his name from, Saul to Paul, and he was raised in Tarsus. And it was also stated that Manaen was raised with Herod the Tetrarch in Acts chapter 13. So I would then point you to Romans chapter 16, verse 10 and 11, which Paul claims he's kind of given shout outs, and he gives a shout out to Herodian, or the littlest Herod, as it's also translated to. And he uses this term synogens, which in the first century meant cousin.
Really fast. What text are you talking to?
I'm talking from
when it talks about this
Out of
Solus, who is a son.
Antiquities.
Antiquities. Okay, Antiquities. What
Antiquities.
section?
That will be out of Antiquities.
Book
It's
12.
14,
Wait,
right?
hang on. No, let me check.
I think it's 14.
16?
He talks about them all over. There's
Oh, it's 14.
Book.
chapter 20.
Oh, nope, 17.
I think
it's
18,
book
14.
17?
Book 17. We can look up. Oh, that's gonna
Book
be long
17
Antiquities.
what?
Chill out. I'm working on it. I'm looking off
Yeah,
of
I'll have to-
the.
Let me look here in my notes and see if I have the actual
I actually
citation
like
for
this
the-
because, like, then
This
you
is
could
going to
say
be so incredibly weird. Here, I'm going to search for.
So you can hear him there. He's like, hey, this is going to be incredibly weird. The other guy, hey, I kind of like this. Generally on this show, they don't get very many people who are actually educated about these topics. But the problem why it's going to be incredibly weird is because he knows that if I'm right, this proves his entire basis of his channel
so
wrong.
I'm looking off of the Wikipedia page that has the stuff on.
Yeah, look up Antipater.
Antipater.
Yeah, look up Antipater.
You said 17?
That's what Wikipedia says.
And it's Antipater the second that we're talking
Right.
about, his family tree.
Give me a minute. I'm gonna mute myself.
I don't see anything on this guy. It's Antipater the second. You're saying he has a son named Saul?
Yes, Saulus or Saul.
And this is in Josephus.
Yeah. And Josephus, in fact, you can go
What particular-
to
So what I
to
see,
20.9.4, and he's mentioned there as well, where it talks about Costabarus also and Saulus did themselves get together a multitude of wicked wretches, and this is because they were of the royal family.
Okay.
And so they obtained favor among them because of their kindred to Agrippa. But still they used violence with the people and were very ready to plunder those that were weaker than themselves. That
Okay.
last part sticks out to me where it says weaker than themselves. Because if you're familiar with Paul's letters, he is constantly berating the Jerusalem assembly, namely James and the other
So you're
apostles
saying
there,
that
calling
this
them
is
weak.
talking about him doing violence in the early 60s?
I believe this is just my personal opinion.
This is in.
I personally
by the way,
believe
no,
that
hold
he's
up.
responsible.
Slow down. Slow down.
Well, you'll have to let me
So-
get my you have to let me get my statement out.
Hold up. You brought up this Solus, and I
Yeah.
mean that's fine. That's whatever. This Solus is actively using violence because of the royal family. They used violence with the people
Yes.
in 62.
Yeah. And I believe that Paul
which would
Paul
be
most
around the
definitely,
time that Paul is, according to the New Testament, not called Saul anymore, and also wouldn't be using violence because he was a Christian and he's about to die.
So you guys missed the earlier parts of the debate when he was debating other people, but one of the arguments they got into was over dates, and his main argument was that the dates aren't really trustworthy via Josephus or via the New Testament, but now he wants to lock me in on a date. So it's kind of funny how they'll shift their argument when they do that. But irregardless of that point, we do know that Paul worked persecuting Christians, standing by while people are being murdered and so on and so forth. We know, just by the way that he talks about his adversaries, calling them weak, all of them weak. We also know that, the way he talks about, those who oppose his certain doctrines, like his doctrine on circumcision, he hopes that, they'll slip their hand and accidentally cut their penis off, and things like that. I mean, this is post his conversion, when he's saying things like that. So we know, I mean, he wasn't like the nicest character. And it's my argument is that the Paul that we have in the New Testament, because I don't believe the New Testament is trustworthy anyway, and neither does this guy. But now he's trying to lock me in on the New Testament as being trustworthy for its portrayal of who we know as Paul. I more look to what Paul said, not what the New Testament says about Paul, because especially like I pointed out in the we document of Acts, it tries to clean up the story about Paul to make him look more likable and not so much of a mean character, but more of the victim of persecution by the regular church. Well, that's if you're interpreting it from like the viewpoint of a like a fundamentalist Christian, where you're like, Paul is the good guy. I don't think Paul is the good guy. I think Paul is sort of trying to usurp the early Christian movement and sort of Hellenize it in a sense, sort of quiet this thing down, because obviously the Romans don't want anybody being
And
called
this
Messiah,
is happening in
king, this, that, that.
62?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So Paul is using violence in 62.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's just look at how he's treated. For instance, he gets like basically this like presidential escort in Acts chapter 23. He's basically given like this royal treatment by the Romans. And you have to remember, they're nailing Jews to crosses daily. It didn't matter if you were a dual citizen or not. If you went against them, you were kind of screwed. But it says, get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide horses for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix. He's then taken. So you got 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen to be held prisoner where? In the governor's quarters, in Governor Felix's personal quarters. That's a weird place to hold a Jewish prisoner who's supposedly guilty of causing an upheaval.
Mm-hmm.
To hold him prisoner in the governor's personal quarters, well, it only makes sense if he's actually a member of the Herod family, because the Herods are a puppet government by the Romans at the time. They
so
are
you're saying
basically
that
there
he's
to
unaliving people in the early 60s. Paul is a real person who unalives people in the early 60s?
Yeah, why not?
Because, I mean, when is this Paul act? So he's not a Christian? He's not the Paul that's presented in the New Testament?
No.
Okay.
No, we're
saying that the Paul presented in the New Testament didn't exist. What you're doing is you're
back to Rome, and he's given a personal bodyguard in Rome.
But okay, listen. We are saying that the Paul or the Saul that is presented in the New Testament didn't exist. Congratulations, you found a Saul, which is a name, in Josephus, but that's not this guy. So I don't know what to tell you.
But you're sort of negating some of my points. My point
you're trying to say that the guy in the early 60s.
Well, you won't let me get my point out. You keep interrupting me. Well, that's kind of not a good way to have a debate. Like if I'm trying to present you with evidence,
about to get removed,
and you're interrupting me.
This is my live, and you will continue to get interrupted if I'm trying to establish what you're talking about. And I'm saying, hey, you are saying this guy in the early 60s is the guy who's talked about in Christianity, but in a different way. I don't know how that gets us to the version of the New Testament, though, is the thing. Like, when does that leap happen is what I'm asking.
I'm sorry, help me kind of understand your question.
When does the leap happen? Because if Saul is a real person, obviously this Saulus is just some guy unaliving people in the early 60s. If Saulus is a real person in the early 60s who unalives people, when do we get a Saul who becomes a Paul in 30-something?
Well, if we have Josephus mentioning a family tree, and we have Antipater has these kids, this particular Saul is raised up in Torah by Rabbi Gamaliel. He says, along with Manaen, who was raised with Herod the Tetrarch in the palace, which they're cousins, it says. Paul tells us he learns Torah from Rabbi Gamaliel. So we have a lot of things that are kind of connecting here. We have this Saul from Tarsus who's claimed, and then we have Saul himself claiming to be a member of the Herod family, the cousin of Herod of Chalcis. And it kind of comes together. That's why I said it's very strong circumstantial evidence that this particular person was mentioned in this family tree by Josephus.
But we know that Acts uses Josephus. So what would prevent the author of Acts and then editors of Paul in the second century from picking up the name Saul and then using biographical details to fill that
That's
in?
a fantastic point. Granted, all I actually believe that everything Acts chapter 16 and on is an edited edition. It's because they call it the we document, because everything sort of changes from they did to we did, and the narration, the actual style of writing changes.
It's ship travels like in the Odyssey.
It changes in 16, and I actually believe that I do believe it was heavily altered to make Paul look more likable, in a sense.
Well,
I mean, he's a very unlikable character by his own words. If you listen to his own letters and his own words, he's a very unlikable character.
I'm still, Matthew, are you finding the connection between this guy and the guy in the text? Like, where do we see that leap? At best, this is maybe someone who's using names based off of the text itself, like, because they're utilizing Josephus, the works of Josephus. But like, Paul isn't even called Shaul in the epistles. So the first time that like Paul is presented by, for instance, Marcion, he doesn't have the name Shaul or anything like that.
No, everyone's calling him Paul. He changes his name to Paul.
No, that's not
it's
in
a
the
Jewish
Pauline
custom.
epistles. That's just Acts.
It's sort of a Jewish custom when you change your religion, in a sense, and he's essentially becoming this new thing in Christ. So he changes his name. So I'm gonna kind of skip ahead from this part because we get in this little debate about whether his name was Paul or Saul, blah blah blah. It was both. It really is sort of an irrelevant, sort of moot point. And I kind of want to get to the more important stuff for you. I honestly, I think that this particular family tree, the connections that are lined up in it, Saul being from Tarsus, who comes from Tarsus to Jerusalem to be trained
the only person
in Talmud Torah by
there's
by
only one
Rabbi
book
Gamaliel.
that says this. There's only one book that says this, and it's not even the Pauline epistles, and that's not the first. Like, it's something that shows up later, and we know it pulls from Josephus's autobiography and from Antiquities of the Jews. If it gets influenced by this story, that's one thing, but this is no way, shape, or form is the guy that it's talking about, because the guy that it's talking about has not only a name change, but he's active prior to this guy, a lot earlier. Like, this guy is going around unaliving people in the early 60s. The Acts does not portray that guy as having the name Saul in the 60s or unaliving people in the 60s. He changes his name like 30 years prior. Like, and stops unaliving people 30 years prior. So I guess even if you want to say that if you want to say it's just like influenced or something, that's fine. But I'm struggling to see how the Paul that is presented in the New Testament as this person who is writing these documents, these epistles and everything like that in the first century, is possibly this guy when he doesn't even line up time-wise, doesn't really line up name-wise. Only in one book does it line up name-wise. When did they make the jump and start saying, hey, let's make this Paul character this guy, I guess, or let's make this Saulus character Paul? Like, who?
So I want to clarify your position. Josephus, who becomes Titus's brother-in-law, he becomes part of the Flavian Roman dynasty. You think that his writings then are influencing what becomes the New Testament later, but at the same time, there are no Roman influences on Christianity.
Roman government influences? Is that what you're saying?
No one said government.
Oh, I don't know what you mean by Roman. Like, Roman what? Roman, like, mythology?
Yeah, Roman influence. I started my
Roman
conversation
what?
off, and When I started this discussion off, I
Uh-huh.
had mentioned that I believed that the Romans had influenced what became Christianity, and you scoffed at that.
Yes,
But
because you
now you're
mentioned the
making the
Flavians.
point. Now
You
you're
mentioned the
making the
Flavians
point.
because you insinuated it was the Roman government, not
Yeah, and
yeah.
and
And now I'm
Josephus was a
asking you if
Flavian.
okay,
What was
cool.
Josephus's last name?
The Roman
Josephus
government was
Flavius.
not the Roman government was not behind the creation of Christianity. That is bullshit.
What was Josephus's last name?
Bar Yosef, or Bar Matthias.
When he became Titus's brother-in-law,
Bar
he
Matthias.
became Josephus Flavius. Click, 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 search. Oh, look, Flavius Josephus, right? Also sometimes called Josephus Flavius. Wow. And he was a Roman Jewish historian and military leader, best known for writing the Jewish War. He was born in Jerusalem. Wow, well, that's pretty crazy, because how could he be called Flavius if he wasn't part of the Flavian family? So here we have the Encyclopedia Britannica, where it says, in Rome, Josephus had been granted citizenship and a pension. He was a favorite at the courts of the emperors Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. He enjoyed the income of a tax-free estate in Judea, and he divorced his third wife and married an aristocratic heiress from Crete, and was even given Roman names to his children. He had written in the official histories of the revolt. We know this, the War of the Jews, etc., Antiquities, and so on and so forth.
It's
You're
Flavius
skating
Josephus.
around
It's actually
that.
the other way.
Sure, whatever, however you want to say
Cool.
it.
Well, you asked for the
So
last
he was
name.
not
Also,
part
on
of.
top of that, that doesn't
He was
sweet.
completely disconnected from the Flavian court.
Awesome. So when someone writes the Epic of Gilgamesh, does that mean that they wrote the Book of Noah? Because
Dude,
Noah takes from the Epic of
Just admit
Gilgamesh?
it. I schooled you. Just admit it.
No, you didn't.
Yeah,
Josephus
I did.
doesn't
Yeah, I
have
did.
anything to do with
You
the New
said they
Testament
didn't
other
have
than
any influence over it whatsoever, and
The
then you
Roman
made the
government
argument
doesn't.
that
No.
Josephus's letters are what's influencing Christianity.
Yeah.
You made that point,
He is not
me.
he is not the government, dipshit. That doesn't make any sense.
No one said the government. You said the government.
No, you did.
So here, we'll play it back, and you can see I never said the government. He's obfuscating and trying to deflect and change the argument and change the framework of the argument so that he can, go around the fact that he just debunked himself. You think that his writings then are influencing what becomes the New Testament later, but at the same time, there are no Roman influences on Christianity.
Roman government influences? Is that what you're saying?
No one said government. So as you can see, he's trying to put words into my mouth. Irregardless, I don't care. It doesn't matter either way. Josephus was technically part of the government. No one said the government. You said the government.
No, you did.
Never did.
Yes.
Play it back.
Yes.
Play it back. Never did. Make a
you were
clip out
talking
of it.
about the
Never did.
Flavians. Josephus is not a Flavian just because he lives. He's the brother-in-law of Titus. Does not make him a Flavian. That's not how that works.
Yes, he's part of the Flavian dynasty. He's part of the Flavian family.
He is not part of the Flavian dynasty.
Yes, he is.
No, he's not. That's
What
not
is
how that works.
what are your prerequisites
Really
to being
quick,
part of the Flavian
if
dynasty?
your brother-in-law,
and then give me a source for where we
if
find
your
that.
brother-in-law is some particular family, does that make you part of that family just because that's your brother-in-law? Like, no, that's not how that works. He's not a part of a dynasty. No, he's just connected to them, sure, like through like a marriage or something. But just because he has books that come out starting in the early 70s, doesn't mean that he is like part of like the government creating it or something like that.
Look, he's got opinions. I got opinions. Opinions don't matter. Let's just look it up, man.
But if the Flavians wrote the Gospels, how could a Roman family know how to write Jewish literature that refers to Jewish prophecy? The answer lies in the Flavians' collaborations with a number of Jewish intellectuals, beginning with their own court historian, Josephus.
Josephus arrives back in Rome with Titus. He becomes an adopted member of the Flavian family. An amazing turn of events for the Jewish turncoat. He becomes Flavius Josephus. Josephus at this time begins writing the history of the war, and he records that Titus gave him the Jewish scripture. Josephus's histories have always been associated with the origins of Christianity.
Time and again you can find parallels between what Josephus writes and what turns up in the Gospels. It's a powerful evidence of their true origin.
In reading the works of Josephus side by side with the Gospels, scholars have noticed parallels between the two works. It appears as though the history of Josephus records events that fulfill the prophecies of the Old and New Testaments. Early Christians understood this connection. In fact, when the Bible first began to be printed in the Middle Ages, it included the history of Josephus.
He was employed to write the official history that we have. The other histories from this period have been destroyed ruthlessly by the Romans. Josephus tells us this in very chilling passages, how the Romans exerted complete control of the literature of this period. There were alternative histories of the Jewish war written. Well, the Romans rounded up the writers of those histories and executed them. They rounded up all the copies of those histories and destroyed them. That is to say, they ruthlessly wiped out any alternative history, so that the only history we have is written by Josephus. And let's remember who Josephus was.
Chief propagandist of the Flavian dynasty, and he was very, very successful. He moved back to Rome. He was given an apartment in the emperor's own townhouse, and he was appointed the chronicler of the Roman Jewish War, using Vespasian's own diaries of the events.
Also in the pages of his history, Josephus declares that the Jews' Messiah or Christ is none other than Flavius Vespasian and his dynastic family.
To put it succinctly, Josephus says that there was a prophecy that a world ruler would come out of Palestine. The Jews thought this applied to one of their own. They were wrong in their interpretations. He used the most cynical interpretation. He applied it to the rise of the Roman emperor in Palestine.
These
So
books
Josephus was
influence
not
these
the.
things.
Hold on. So Josephus was not the court historian.
The court historian? No.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, he wasn't.
No.
Oh, news flash to the world.
Okay.
You learned it here today. History has changed at this moment.
Sweet.
Josephus wasn't
So
the court
anyways,
historian for the
just
Flavian
because-
dynasty.
just-
Ooh, I have this crazy idea. Let's look that up too. Just search that up right there. Oh, what do you know? The court historian. Maybe I'm reading it
we
wrong.
have, like, say for instance, Noah's Ark is based off of like Epic of Gilgamesh. That doesn't mean that the person who wrote the Epic of Gilgamesh had any hand in writing the Noah's Ark story. We have
Oh, really?
influence. Sweet.
Who tasked,
so we have.
who tasked Josephus?
Shut the fuck up, dude. We have influence from Josephus's text. Josephus does not write anything about Christianity or anything like that. Nothing from Christianity explicitly comes from Josephus. The Roman government did not authorize the creation of Jesus or the creation of Gospels or the creation of Christianity. That is not a thing. In fact, in Pliny's letter to Trajan, Pliny, who served under the Flavians, actually said that he was not used to, he didn't know anything about the Christians. That's
So I completely disagree with him, and I would say, the conclusion that they knew about Christianity is absolutely plausible in light of the fact that there were individuals within the Flavian court who were aware of Christianity around the time Josephus published War of the Jews. Further than that, there were 4 colleges in Rome that were responsible for overseeing the religions within the empire, because religion was an important tool of the state. So these colleges had, considerable political power. From Augustus on, the emperor was a member of all 4 colleges, of which, one of them is, it's a weird, I don't even know how to say it, if I know how to say it correctly, but it was the Quincendiumuri, Sacris Factionis or something like that. It was responsible for the regulation of foreign cults in Rome. And all the Flavian emperors were members of this college.
and they would have studied Christianity as a foreign cult during this era. And more than this, what's more obvious, a more obvious reason to believe that the Flavians were familiar with Christianity is that so much of the New Testament is related to the family. The Flavians brought about the fulfillment of all of Jesus' doomsday prophecies, the destruction of the temple, the encircling of Jerusalem with a wall, the towns of Galilee being brought low, the destruction of what, Jesus describes as the, quote, wicked generation, Titus's mistresses, Bernice and Tiberius Alexander, his chief of staff during the siege of Jerusalem, are actually named within the New Testament. So, this Flavian cult, they're, sort of canon, I guess you could say, of Josephus sort of prophesized the accomplishment of these Flavians in a way. And so these named individuals within this circle actually had converts within the imperial family who would certainly have been scrutinized during an era when, the regulation of religion was so important that the emperor himself was involved with it, like I said before.